What if the biggest breakthroughs in human history didn't fail, but were quietly pushed out of the way? Not because they were dangerous, not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well. Throughout modern history, inventors have claimed to solve problems we still struggle with today. Energy, medicine, transportation, even space travel. Some were flawed, some were exaggerated, but some were real enough to scare the people already in power. This isn't a story about secret villains hiding in the shadows. It's about economics, incentives, and what happens when progress moves faster than the systems built to profit from it. These are the inventions that didn't just challenge industries, they threatened to make them irrelevant. 1. Adjustable focus glasses. Who would have guessed that one of the most disruptive inventions in eye care wasn't high-tech at all, but almost insultingly simple? In the early 2000s, a physicist named Joshua Silver developed glasses with fluid-filled lenses that users could adjust themselves. You turned a small dial and the lens curvature changed. Near vision, distance vision, everything in between. One pair of glasses replaced prescriptions, repeat exams, and constant upgrades. What made this dangerous wasn't that it didn't work. It did. Field trials across Africa and Asia showed people achieving usable vision in minutes, often matching clinical prescriptions closely enough for daily life. For regions with limited access to optometrists, this wasn't just convenient. It was transformative. And that's where the problem started. Modern eyewear is built on a recurring revenue model. Eye exams, prescription updates, lens replacements, premium frames. Adjustable glasses collapse that cycle. One device, one purchase, long-term use. That doesn't break the system through force. It breaks it through irrelevance. No regulator banned the glasses. No company sued to stop them. Instead, something quieter happened. Major eyewear manufacturers didn't adopt them. Retail chains didn't stock them. Professional optometry organizations showed little enthusiasm. The technology was pushed into charity programs and pilot projects, framed as a temporary solution rather than a consumer product. Suppression here wasn't dramatic. It was economic indifference, amplified by an industry with no incentive to make vision a one-time fix. 2. Rife frequency machine. Imagine if the biggest medical breakthrough of the 20th century didn't come from a lab, but from one man tuning a frequency. In the 1930s, Royal Raymond Rife claimed that diseases, including cancer, could be destroyed by targeting their specific electromagnetic frequencies. His idea was simple but radical. Instead of drugs or surgery, use resonance. Hit the pathogen's frequency and it breaks apart, leaving healthy tissue unharmed. Rife didn't just theorize this, he built machines and demonstrated them to physicians. Some early observers reported promising outcomes, enough to attract attention during a time when cancer treatments were crude and brutal. If true, the implications were catastrophic for the medical economy. No long drug regimens, no patented compounds, no chronic treatment cycles. A machine-based cure doesn't scale profit, it scales access. What followed wasn't a single shutdown, but a cascade. Rife's laboratory was destroyed in a fire. Medical institutions dismissed his work as unproven. He was charged with practicing medicine without a license. Funding dried up. Research avenues closed. By the 1940s, his work had been pushed completely outside mainstream medicine. To be clear, no modern clinical trials have validated Rife's claims. Reproducibility remains the central failure. But what stands out is how quickly the idea was institutionally sealed off. No large-scale follow-up studies. No controlled replication efforts backed by major bodies. Instead of being disproven conclusively, Rife's work was professionally isolated. The most efficient way to ensure an idea disappears without ever being fully tested. If stories like this matter to you, the kind that question how innovation really survives. Make sure you subscribe. More deep dives are coming. 3. Starlight material. What if one of the most heat-resistant materials ever created vanished simply because its inventor wouldn't give up control? In the 1980s, a British inventor named Maurice Ward demonstrated a material he called starlight. On live television, he coated a raw egg with it and blasted it with a blowtorch for minutes. When the shell cracked open, the egg inside was still raw. This wasn't a party trick. Subsequent tests reportedly showed resistance to extreme temperatures, the kind associated with aerospace re-entry, industrial accidents, and even nuclear-level heat bursts. Defense agencies, aerospace firms, and research institutions expressed serious interest. The disruption was obvious. A cheap, lightweight thermal barrier would reshape fire safety, military armor, aviation, and space travel. Entire categories of high-cost shielding and insulation could become obsolete. But Ward refused to sell the formula outright. He insisted on retaining control, fearing the material would be buried, weaponized, or locked behind military contracts. He also never patented it, believing patents made theft easier, not harder. Negotiations stalled. Corporations walked away. Governments have lost patience. Without institutional backing, Starlight never reached mass production. When Ward died in 2011, the complete formula died with him. No identical material has since been independently verified. This wasn't suppression through force. It was suppression through incompatibility, an invention too powerful to ignore, but too independent to absorb into existing power structures. 4. Water fuel cell. What if the solution to the energy crisis was sitting in a glass of water? In the early 1990s, an American inventor named Stanley Meyer claimed he'd built a device that could run a car on water. He called it a water fuel cell. According to Meyer, his system split water into hydrogen and oxygen, using far less energy than conventional electrolysis, producing enough fuel to power an engine efficiently. Meyer didn't just talk. He filed multiple U.S. patents, demonstrated a working dune buggy, and drew attention from investors, foreign governments, and reportedly even the U.S. military. If true, this wasn't an improvement on gasoline. It was an extinction-level threat to the oil industry. Then the pushback started. In 1996, Meyer was sued by investors, and a court in Ohio ruled that his invention did not perform as claimed, concluding he had grossly and egregiously misrepresented the technology. That ruling still stands as the strongest official rejection of his work. But the story didn't end there. In 1998, Meyer collapsed and died suddenly while dining with investors. His brother claimed Meyer's last words were, "They poisoned me." The official cause of death was a brain aneurysm, with no evidence of foul play. Still, the timing ignited decades of speculation. No one has successfully replicated Meyer's device. According to MIT and U.S. Department of Energy assessments, such efficiency would violate known thermodynamic limits. By scientific standards, the case is closed. But economically, the reaction was predictable. Once courts discredited the invention, research funding vanished overnight. The idea wasn't debated. It was discarded. Fast, final, and permanently. 5. Wireless power transmission. There was a moment when electricity almost stopped being something you paid for. In the early 1900s, Nikola Tesla proposed something radical: transmitting electrical power wirelessly across long distances. No cables, no grids, no meters. His vision was global energy, available everywhere, instantly. Tesla didn't just imagine this. He successfully demonstrated wireless power transmission at small scales and began constructing the Wardenclyffe Tower in 1901 on Long Island. The project was funded by J.P. Morgan, initially under the assumption it would improve communications. Then Morgan asked the wrong question: where do we put the meter? Once it became clear that Tesla's system offered no clear way to charge users, funding stopped. According to Tesla's own letters, financial support was withdrawn not because the idea failed, but because it couldn't be monetized. By 1917, the tower was demolished for scrap. If wireless power had succeeded, it wouldn't have disrupted one company. It would have disrupted utilities, infrastructure, billing systems, and energy monopolies all at once. Historians agree the technology faced enormous technical challenges. Long-distance efficiency wasn't solved, but the project wasn't allowed to fail naturally. It was abandoned the moment profitability disappeared. As the Smithsonian Institution later noted, Tesla's downfall wasn't scientific incompetence. It was economic isolation. The future he envisioned didn't collapse under physics alone. It collapsed under the reality that free power doesn't fit neatly into a business model. 6. 200 miles per gallon carburetors. What if cars didn't need new fuel, just less of it? In the 1920s, a Canadian inventor named Charles Pogue claimed he'd designed a carburetor that allowed engines to run on highly vaporized fuel, delivering up to 200 miles per gallon. Decades later, in the 1970s, Tom Ogle made similar claims with a fuel vapor system that reportedly achieved 100 miles per gallon in real-world tests. Unlike alternative fuels, these inventions didn't require new infrastructure. They worked with gasoline. That was the danger. If true, fuel demand would drop sharply. Oil profits wouldn't disappear, but they would shrink massively. Both inventors attracted attention, investors, and media coverage. Ogle was even featured on national television in 1978, demonstrating his system. Then the stories abruptly stopped. Neither invention was ever mass-produced. Patents stalled. Designs vanished. According to people close to Ogle, he faced intense pressure to sell or abandon his work. In 1981, at just 26 years old, Ogle died suddenly. The official cause was a drug overdose, though family members disputed that explanation. No definitive proof of suppression exists. No court cases, no documents. But the pattern is consistent. Incremental efficiency doesn't excite manufacturers. It threatens consumption-based economics. As automotive historian reports have noted, vapor carburetor designs weren't embraced because they reduced repeat fuel sales without offering new revenue streams. They weren't illegal. They were inconvenient. And sometimes that's enough to make an invention disappear. 7. Compressed air car, AirPod. What if the car that could have broken our addiction to oil didn't need batteries, gasoline, or charging stations at all? In 1997, a French engineer named Guy Negre began working on a vehicle powered entirely by compressed air. Instead of burning fuel, the engine released pressurized air stored in onboard tanks, producing zero emissions. By 2004, working prototypes existed. By 2007, the idea was serious enough that Tata Motors signed a licensing deal to manufacture the cars in India. This wasn't vaporware. The vehicle, called the AirPod, could reach 43 to 60 miles per hour, travel up to 135 miles, and refill its air tanks in about 90 seconds. For dense cities, taxis, and short commutes, it was more than viable. So why did it stall? According to Tata Motors' own statements in 2009, the technology faced performance limitations. Range dropped under real conditions. There was no refilling infrastructure. Efficiency suffered at higher speeds. All true. But there was another issue no one rushed to solve. A compressed air ecosystem doesn't benefit oil companies, battery suppliers, or power utilities. There's no fuel subscription, no charging network, no long-term dependency. By 2010, rollout plans were quietly delayed. By 2016, Negra had passed away. Commercial production never materialized. No ban, no lawsuit. Just a technology that worked well enough to threaten existing systems, but not well enough to be defended by them. And now I want to hear from you. Which invention do you think was the most disruptive? The one that posed the biggest threat to powerful interests? Drop it in the comments. Let's see which ideas still make people uncomfortable. Because the most dangerous inventions aren't the ones that fail. They're the ones that almost changed everything. 8. Cold fusion. What if the cleanest energy source ever discovered was laughed out of existence in a single week? In March 1989, chemists Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Ponce announced they had achieved nuclear fusion at room temperature. No massive reactors, no extreme heat, just a tabletop experiment producing excess energy. If true, this would have changed everything. Unlimited clean energy, no carbon emissions, no radioactive waste, and no fuel shortages. Oil, coal, and even conventional nuclear power would become obsolete. The backlash was immediate. Major laboratories attempted to replicate the experiment and failed. Within months, institutions like MIT, Caltech, and the US Department of Energy publicly dismissed the findings. Funding evaporated. Media coverage flipped from excitement to ridicule. Cold fusion became a scientific punchline. But here's what's often missed. The original experiment was never fully standardized. Key details were vague. And instead of slow, methodical replication, the scientific community rushed to disprove it. According to later DOE reviews in 2004, some experiments did show unexplained excess heat, just not enough to overturn consensus. Research didn't stop. It went underground, rebranded as low-energy nuclear reactions, LENR, quietly funded by private groups and foreign labs. Cold fusion wasn't conclusively proven, but it also wasn't conclusively killed. It was professionally exiled, too disruptive to pursue loudly, too promising to abandon completely. 9. EV1 electric car. What if the electric car revolution didn't start in the 2000s, but was deliberately shut down in the 1990s? In 1996, General Motors released the EV1, the first modern mass-produced electric car by a major automaker. It was fast, quiet, reliable, and required almost no maintenance. Drivers loved it. Some refused to give theirs back. This wasn't a prototype. It was on the road. The EV1 had a range of up to 140 miles, dedicated charging stations across California, and zero tailpipe emissions. Celebrities like Tom Hanks leased one. According to internal surveys later revealed, customer satisfaction exceeded most gas vehicles GM sold at the time. Then the GM killed it. In 2003, the company ended the program, repossessed leased vehicles, and crushed nearly every EV1 despite protests. GM claimed the cars were unprofitable and demand was low, a claim heavily disputed by drivers and later examined in the documentary Who Killed the Electric Car? 2006. Critics pointed to pressure from oil companies, auto dealers, and the rollback of California's zero-emission vehicle mandate. Electric cars don't need oil changes, exhaust systems, or frequent repairs. All major revenue streams. The EV1 didn't fail technologically. It worked. It failed economically. Not because it wasn't wanted, but because it arrived before the industry was ready to let gasoline go. 10. Nuclear thermal rocket, NERVA. What if the fastest, most powerful space engine ever built was already finished, and then quietly shelved? In the 1960s, NASA and the US government developed the nuclear engine for rocket vehicle application, better known as NERVA. It wasn't theoretical, it wasn't experimental. It was tested, fired, and proven. Instead of burning chemical fuel, Nerva used a nuclear reactor to superheat hydrogen, producing thrust twice as efficient as conventional rockets. According to NASA test data from 1964 to 1972, Nerva engines ran for hours, not seconds, reaching power levels suitable for manned missions to Mars. Engineers at the time stated that a round trip to Mars could be cut nearly in half, with payload capacities chemical rockets could never match. So, why did it disappear? Officially, Nerva was canceled in 1973 due to budget cuts and shifting political priorities after Apollo. But internal reports tell a deeper story. Nuclear propulsion terrified regulators, defense agencies, and politicians. A civilian space program powered by nuclear reactors raised concerns about launch accidents, proliferation optics, and public backlash. More importantly, Nerva blurred lines between civilian spaceflight and military nuclear capability. Documents later declassified under U.S. secrecy regulations show that several propulsion advances related to nuclear rockets were restricted or classified, limiting further civilian development. The engine worked. That was never in dispute. What stopped it was risk. Political, economic, and reputational. Nuclear propulsion didn't fit a world trying to move away from anything labeled nuclear, even when the science was sound. To this day, NASA openly acknowledges that no modern rocket has surpassed Nerva's efficiency. The most advanced engine ever built for deep space didn't fail. It was simply too powerful to be comfortable. What makes Nerva even more unsettling is what happened after it was shut down. Under U.S. law, technologies tied to nuclear propulsion, advanced energy systems, and spaceflight don't just get canceled, they often get classified. Invention Secrecy Act. Since 1951, the Inventions Secrecy Act has allowed the government to place secrecy orders on patent applications deemed sensitive to national security. According to publicly released figures, thousands of inventions remain under active secrecy orders, some renewed year after year, never entering the public record. NASA has since acknowledged that no chemical rocket built after Apollo has surpassed Nerva's efficiency, yet meaningful civilian development stalled for decades. Portions of nuclear propulsion research were restricted, fragmented, or folded into defense programs where public access ended. The technology didn't vanish. It simply stopped being visible. That's the pattern. When an invention is too disruptive, too powerful, or too destabilizing for existing systems, it doesn't always get destroyed. Sometimes it gets classified, defunded, reframed, or quietly absorbed into places the public never sees. And that's the thread running through every invention on this list. Some were flawed, some were exaggerated, some probably deserved skepticism, but all of them shared one thing in common. They threatened to change the rules faster than powerful industries were willing to adapt. And when that happens, progress doesn't always lose because it's wrong. Sometimes it loses because it works too well. By now, you've probably noticed a pattern. None of these inventions disappeared the same way. Some were dismissed, some were defunded, some were classified, some were quietly ignored until time did the rest. Progress doesn't always get stopped by force. Sometimes it gets buried under bureaucracy, sometimes it gets priced out, and sometimes it just gets made inconvenient enough to forget.